The cry had started in the heart of the Verilin palace and refused to stop. It echoed down corridors carved from living crystal, resonating through walls laced with woven gold, shaking the calm of even the most seasoned attendants. It was not just the cry of a child, it was a sound that fractured composure, tore through ancient ceremony, and unsettled the very throne upon which a queen had stood unshaken for decades. The infant heir, Amira, born under rare starlight and wrapped in prophecy, screamed with a voice far too large for her tiny frame. Her cries did not falter, did not weaken. They pressed into the air like pressure waves, making even the guards clench their teeth behind polished helms. In the high chamber of the Celestine Arch, Queen Allura stood near her throne, unmoving, eyes fixed on nothing. Her silver tendrils of hair, usually sculpted into immaculate coils, hung loose around her sharp cheekbones. The light from the chamber's prismatic walls flickered against her golden skin, but there was no glow in her eyes. Her expression was unreadable, a mask forged by years of rule, but her clenched fists betrayed her. A mother was breaking beneath the weight of silence and sound. Attendants came and went like shifting tides, healers in radiant robes, medics with sleek biotools, ancient priestesses humming sacred lullabies in forgotten tongues. They tried vibrational pacifiers tuned to the child's DNA resonance. They flooded the room with ambient fields, flickers of sound and color only Verilin infants could sense. They performed rites of calm, drawing sigils in the air with ionized flame. Nothing worked. She is not ill, murmured Ahila the High. Biomed. Her voice barely pierced the layered hum of machines and murmured chants. Vitals stable. Neural readouts within range. Then why does she cry? Asked Aloft, the queen's advisor. His voice cracked at the end. He was not used to feeling helpless. No one answered. The queen did not look at him. She only stared at her daughter Amira, the heir of the empire, whose crystal tears streamed in shimmering rivers down violet silk. Then came a voice, small and human, from the edge of the grand arch. May I try? Heads turned sharply. The guards bristled. Even the child's cries paused only slightly, but enough for everyone to notice. The man stood still, hands visible, no armor, no regalia. His clothes were plain, planetary issue fabric from the Earth Envoy, dust-streaked. Boots, a neutral tunic. Nothing about him belonged in the crystalline magnificence of the throne room. He was Jonah Run, the human botanist, just one of many quiet observers sent to represent Earth's peaceful alliance. Queen Allura turned her head slowly. Her golden eyes met his. There was no patience in her gaze, only the weight of expectation and fury just beneath. You are not a healer, she said. No, Jonah replied calmly. But I've held crying children before. My little sister, my niece. Sometimes they don't want silence. Sometimes they want to feel someone stay. No one dared move. The child screamed again, shrill, piercing, unbearable. Jonah took a step forward. May I hold her? The guards advanced, but Allura lifted one hand. She stared at the man not with warmth, but with the clinical calculation of a ruler trained to measure lives against empires. And yet, for the first time in hours, she blinked. The scream stopped. The throne room lay in stunned silence, fractured only by the distant echo of retreating boots and the breathless awe that followed what no one dared name a miracle. The baby Amira, heir to the Verilin Empire, rested in the arms of a human. And she was quiet, not silent from exhaustion, not lulled by technology. She was peaceful. Her delicate eyes, ringed with faint gold, blinked slowly before drifting shut. Her tiny chest rose and fell with even rhythm. The same child whose cry had rattled diplomatic resolve and driven a queen to near, collapse now slept against the chest of a man whose very presence had barely warranted notice the day before. Jonah Run held her gently, his stance neither reverent nor casual, simply present, grounded. His roughened hands, more used to the soil of alien planets than palace crystal, now held the future of an empire. And still he said nothing. He only hummed. The Verilin delegation was frozen in a tableau of disbelief. The nursemaid, hands still, half-raised, looked like a statue carved in fear. Aloft, the queen's advisor blinked as if uncertain whether he still existed in the same reality. Ahila, the high biomed, checked her instruments again and again, each time finding nothing wrong, nothing explainable. Queen Allura descended the throne with slow, deliberate steps, her ornate robes whispering across the polished crystal floor. She stopped before the human. Her face was carved from centuries of control. But her voice was something else. "How did you know?" she asked softly. Jonah didn't look up. His eyes remained on the baby, who now snored just faintly, a sound more divine than any priestess chant. "I didn't," he said. "I just stayed." Allura stared. None of our kind could calm her. "And you—" "I'm not your kind," he interrupted gently. "I know." That, perhaps, was what made it work. The queen said nothing more. She only stepped back and turned away, her hand brushing the air. "Give him quarters, here, in the palace." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Jonah blinked. "Wait, what?" "You will stay," she said. "My daughter chose you. The bond is made." "I didn't mean to. I didn't ask what you meant," she said, her voice sharper. "Now, I asked you to stay." And with that, she vanished behind the velvet-draped archway, leaving the most powerful court in the galaxy shaken by a decision they didn't understand. They gave Jonah rooms carved from pale coral glass, high in the east spire. The views stretched beyond the domed cities and into the sky, where planets glowed like lanterns and ships traced starlit arcs across the firmament. But he noticed none of it. He sat alone for hours, staring at his hands. The same hands that had pulled weeds from Earth's stubborn soil. The same that now held the trust of a child born of stars. He wasn't detained. He wasn't guarded. But he wasn't free either. People whispered when he passed in the halls. They bowed to him uncertainly, as if unsure whether he was a guest or an omen. Nobles began requesting audience with him not for diplomacy, but for answers. And he had none. 3 nights later, the queen came to him, not with guards, not with ceremony. She came alone, dressed simply, the braid of her silver hair undone. She asked him, without preamble, "What calms you?" Jonah blinked at the question. "Nothing calms me," he said. "I just get quiet enough to hear what matters." They spoke for hours. About plants, about Earth, about how children cry when the room feels wrong and laugh when the wind smells like home. She listened like a scholar before a living text. As the sun rose, a mirror was brought in. She squealed when she saw Jonah, and with a force of will that shocked even her attendants, reached for him. Allura looked down at her daughter, then at him. "She chooses you, still." "I'm not sure what that means." "It means," the queen said slowly, "you are no longer a visitor." That day, in the hidden halls of the palace, cloaked in light and suspicion, Jonah Run became something the Verilin Empire had no name. For not guest, not prisoner, not prophet, just the one who stayed, and the one who stayed would soon change everything. The gardens of Verilin were a quiet war to the untrained eye. They shimmered with tranquil beauty, spiraling trees that hummed faintly with photosynthetic resonance, pools of starlit water that reflected not just light but memory, and blossoms that shifted color with the emotion of those who walked among them. But Jonah Run, alone in their middle, knew better. These gardens weren't peaceful. They were watching, and so were the people. Since the night the infant heir stopped crying in his arms, Jonah's world had narrowed to a surreal limbo. He was no longer part of the diplomatic envoy Earth's representatives, had been quietly escorted away under the guise of strategic restabilization. No one on his delegation had protested. Not once. Not after witnessing the baby reach. For him, like a soul remembering something forgotten, Jonah had remained. His new quarters were lavish, spacious, and heavily monitored. Not with cameras or threats, but with the careful weight of presence. Servants who never made eye contact. Courtiers who smiled with tight lips and reported everything they saw. Even the child's nursemaid, kind-eyed, cautious, never left the room while Jonah was there. Not that he blamed her. He didn't belong here. And everyone knew it, except Amira. She reached for him every time, and every time she smiled. "You realize what this implies?" asked a voice behind him. Jonah didn't turn. He recognized it instantly. Aloft, the Queen's advisor, thin and tall, his features composed like a mask made of political caution. "She's a baby," Jonah said. "She smiles at birds." "Birds do not activate dormant empathic pathways," Aloft replied coolly. "Birds do not soothe psionic surges tied to legacy bloodlines." "You do." Jonah finally looked at him. "So what? I'm a bipedal pacifier?" Aloft did not laugh. "You are an anomaly," Jonah smirked faintly. "And called worse." The advisor stepped forward, eyes sharp. "You may think this is coincidence, that your calming presence is a quirk. It is not. There are prophecies forgotten by most, but not by the crown." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Prophecies? Seriously?" Aloft didn't blink. "When a child of the House of Vel cries in starlight, and cannot be stilled by Verilin hands, the one who brings silence will not be of our blood. Nor of our stars." Jonah turned fully. "You're saying I'm in a prophecy?" "I'm saying," Aloft said slowly, "that many will see you as salvation, and others will see you as a threat. That threat revealed itself 2 nights. Later. It began with silence, the kind that feels wrong in a palace full of hums and whispers." Jonah was returning from the observatory where Amira had fallen asleep against his shoulder again. He carried her gently, wrapped in translucent silk, the warm glow of the baby pulsing faintly against his chest. Then a flicker in the corridor. "Too fast. Too sharp." He turned just as the lights dimmed and saw 3 shapes detach from the shadows. Blades drawn, faces masked. Verilin assassins. No words. No warning. Jonah didn't hesitate. He didn't know where the instinct came from. Maybe from years of hiking across unstable terrain, maybe from nights sleeping under unpredictable skies, maybe from love. All he knew was this. He turned his body and shielded the baby. The first blade struck his back. Searing pain shot through him, but he did not drop her. The second never landed because something exploded through the air, a pressure wave, blue-white and thunderous. It flung the attackers against the walls with bone-snapping force. When Jonah opened his eyes, Amira was glowing again, but not softly. Fiercely. The nursemaid came screaming. Guards arrived seconds later, too late to be useful. Jonah fell to his knees, still cradling the child. She blinked up at him and let out a curious coo-like. The storm had passed and she decided he was still worth keeping. Blood dripped from his side. And then the Queen was there. She didn't run. Queens don't run. But she arrived with enough speed that the air carried the scent of ozone. She dropped beside him without thinking, hands trembling, the facade gone. "She saved me," Jonah rasped. "Or I saved her. Maybe both." Alora stared at him. Not with political calculation. Not with cultural confusion. She looked at him like she was seeing something ancient through new eyes. "You were willing to die," she whispered. "She needed me. You stayed." Jonah smiled faintly, eyelids drooping. "Still here." He passed out, and as the Queen lifted him from the floor with her own arms, Amira glowing between them, The guards knelt instinctively, not just to their queen, but to the human she carried. Beneath the glass-domed sky of the Verilin gardens, day and night blended into something unnameable. The heavens here were always visible, and yet unreachable distant constellations etched across the curved horizon like divine handwriting, suspended in perpetual glow. Trees twisted in spirals of pale green and silver, their leaves shaped like crescents, humming softly as they turned toward alien light. Flowers pulsed to emotional currents. Pools reflected not just faces, but the memories of those who peered too long into their depths. This was not a place for peace. This was a place for reckoning. Jonah Run sat in its heart, dirt under his fingernails, tending to a glowing vine that shrank from most Verilin hands but responded to his touch. A seedling, brought here decades ago from a dead moon, now stretched toward his palm like a child reaching for a story. The botanical staff kept their distance. They said it wasn't supposed to bloom until the next twin eclipse. It bloomed anyway. Across the reflecting pool, Queen Allura stood silently, her robes black this time, her crown absent. The court had demanded she wear it, especially now after the assassination attempt, but she had left it behind. This garden, this day, was not for ruling. It was for watching something she did not yet understand. The human knelt beside soil and life, unbothered by the weight of 1,000 watching stars. Amira was with him again. She lay curled in a sling across his chest, content and drowsy, her tiny fingers clutched around the edge of Jonah's sleeve. The child whose psionic potential had nearly vaporized 3 trained assassins now slept like she had never known sorrow. Her glow pulsed in rhythm with Jonah's breath. She responds to your calm, Allura said, finally breaking the quiet. Her voice was not royal here. It was personal, searching, even in fear, especially in fear. Jonah looked up, squinting slightly. She's not just hearing me, she's feeling me. Empathy, they say, the queen murmured. A rare gift, dangerous, untamable. Or maybe we just never gave it the right soil. She approached then, slow steps across grass that shimmered underfoot. She stopped beside him and watched his hands, how gently they folded a creeping stalk into place, how he didn't force anything to grow, he let it lean where it wanted. You don't act like a guardian, she said. I'm not. You don't. Act like a courtier. I'm not that either. Then what are you, Jonah of Earth? He paused, brushing soil from his fingers, then shrugged. I'm someone who doesn't run. Allura sat beside him, a scandal in itself. No guards. Number. Attendance. Just the ruler of 1,000 star systems sitting next to a human dirt worker with her daughter resting on his chest. If anyone saw, they would whisper for decades. I was taught to lead without feeling, she said. To hold power without attachment. Emotion was weakness. Vulnerability, treason. Jonah nodded slowly. We teach that too. Back home, men mostly. She tilted her head. But I had a sister, he said softly. She cried through storms, through grief, through nights when our parents couldn't even look at each other. I held her. I didn't try to fix it. I just stayed. Allura looked at him, truly looked, as if he were less a man and more a message. You speak of family as if it means everything. It does, Jonah replied, or it should. A pause. Then, you don't fear me. No, he said honestly. I could end you with a thought. But you haven't. The queen's expression flickered anger, confusion, something else. I don't understand why you matter. To her, to us. I don't either. They sat in silence for a while. The pool beside them shimmered. And then Amira stirred, blinked once, and reached not for her mother, but for Jonah's cheek, patting it sleepily with her tiny glowing palm, and something changed. The pool lit up. Allor gasped and stood. The reflection in the water was not of the three of them sitting in a garden. It was of stars collapsing, converging, forming a spiral, a great ring. At its center, a planet wrapped in vines. Earth. It's a vision, she whispered. No. Jonah said, rising to his feet as the baby cooed. It's a memory. Behind them, hidden sensors triggered alarms. Deep in the palace archives, long-forgotten databases lit up symbols that hadn't activated in 10,000 cycles. A resonance match between Jonah's biometrics and a sealed Verilin genetic strand. System had a single line of output. Root line confirmed, ancestral anomaly detected. And across the palace, one of the royal archivists dropped her datapad, staring in disbelief. He's not just bonded. He's kin. The Grand Nexus Hall, a marvel of refracted starlight and living crystal, pulsed with the energy of diplomatic pageantry. Every step resonated with notes from the palace floor, playing a soft, ambient harmony tailored to the mood of the court. The hall had not hosted such a gathering in decades. Delegates from across the galactic sectors arrived in shimmering transports, draped in ceremonial silks and alloyed armor, bringing rare gifts and well-rehearsed smiles. Allura stood at the center of it all, not in morning black or imperial white, but in a deep indigo reserved for transitions, a color worn by rulers who stood at the edge of choice. The crown returned to her brow tonight, but something in the way she carried it had changed. It was no longer armor. It was weight. Behind her, the air floated gently in her hover cradle, radiant and still. Peaceful as always when Jonah was near, and he was near. He stood off to the side, in borrowed finery that made him look vaguely like nobility but couldn't quite hide the calloused hands, the eyes that didn't dart like the other diplomats. He didn't scan the room for advantage. He didn't measure conversation by status. He just stood, present, grounded. It unsettled the court more than any weapon could have. But tonight, the illusion of acceptance was strong. Toasts were made, offers whispered. Eyes glanced toward the child, then toward the human beside her, and then came the scream. It wasn't Amira this time. It was the air. The harmony of the hall collapsed into dissonance as something unseen surged. Through the chamber, not a weapon, not a bomb, something older, deeper. Every psionically sensitive being in the room dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Light fractured. Crystals dimmed. Amira began to cry, but not in pain. In warning. Jonah's vision blurred. He felt the pull again, that same instinct that made him shield her days ago. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was recognition. Lights blacked out. When they returned, a sigil blazed into the center of the floor. Concentric rings, etched in a language no one remembered, but everyone somehow felt. The Queen's guards surrounded the heir. Courtiers ran. Dignitaries panicked. And from the shadows emerged the High Seer. Veiled in folds of shadowglass robes, the seer had not been seen in years. Thought by many to be mad, exiled to the starless monasteries of the Void Crescent, she stepped into the light, eyes white with psionic fire. "The bond is real," she said, voice echoing unnaturally. "The seed has awakened." Jonah took a step forward, chest tight. "What bond?" "You are the echo," she said. "You are the first ripple. From the root, the air does not just sense you. She remembers you." He stared. "That doesn't make sense. She's a baby." "She is the vessel," the seer whispered. "You are the key." Then a flash. From her hand, a shard of crystal, a memory core, tumbled across the floor. The Queen caught it, and palace systems ignited in response. A projection lit the chamber. Faint, faded, almost decayed. An ancient message. A face that bore a haunting resemblance to Jonah's older, scarred, but unmistakably human, speaking in Verilin. "If you are seeing this, It means the bridge survived. The child will carry the inheritance, but she will need the one who stayed. Jonah backed away, breath shallow. That's not me, he said. The queen's voice was ice and fire. That is you. The message continued. We seeded earth with what little remained of our line before the sundering. The child will cry, not for food, nor warmth, but for remembrance. Only one of us will answer. The projection ended. Silence consumed the hall. Jonah shook his head. You're telling me I'm some long-lost cousin of an alien bloodline? No, the queen said. You are Verilin. And Earth was never primitive. It was forgotten. He stared at her. At Amira, at the sigil now burning beneath his feet. A botanist, he whispered. And yet you carry the legacy of stars. Allura replied. Why now? He asked. The high seer answered, her voice low. Because peace requires memory. And memory requires pain. The lights dimmed once more. And the queen turned to the gathered court. Hear me, she said, her voice steady. This human is not a guest. He is not an outsider. He is the guardian of the root, the protector of the bond. There were gasps, cries of protest. But she lifted a hand, and if any doubt remains, let them step forward. Let them try to take the child from his arms. No one moved. Jonah looked down at Amira. She looked up at him, and for the first time since he arrived on Verilin, Jonah felt the truth settle in his bones, not as theory or fate or prophecy, but as belonging. The dreams began that night. Jonah woke in a cold sweat, breath caught between choking and gasping, the echo of something vast fading from the corners of his vision. Not a nightmare. Not exactly. Something older than fear. Something that had watched him through the stars and whispered in a voice shaped like his own. He sat up in the silent dark of his guest chamber, one hand pressed to his chest as if trying to contain the pull inside him. The light was faint, but still there, Amira's glow, bleeding softly through the thin door to the adjoining nursery. She had cried out in her sleep just once. Then quiet. Jonah rose, heart pounding, and crossed to the threshold. She was awake. Not crying. Not afraid. Just staring. Right at him. Eyes glowing gold, with the faint spiral of the root sigil pulsing beneath her skin like an ember caught beneath glass. And for one impossible moment, he saw through her eyes. Not metaphorically. Literally. He stood not in the palace, not in the nursery, but in an ancient chamber of vines and starlight, surrounded by monoliths humming with voices he could not understand but instinctively knew. They called him not by name, but by purpose. Witness, carrier. Echo. The chamber collapsed inwards. Jonah snapped awake again, this time at the edge of the queen's private council chamber, where she had summoned him without warning. Guards flanked the walls, not to protect her from him, not out of fear, out of uncertainty. His presence now stirred more than whispers. It stirred belief. And belief, in a place ruled by logic and legacy, was more dangerous than any rebellion. Allura stood in the center of the chamber, draped in ceremonial armor laced with psionic metal. Her eyes were clear, unblinking. But her voice was taut as string pulled to breaking. There was another child, she said. Jonah froze. What? Before Amira, born 12 cycles ago, also under rare starlight, also gifted. She died. We told the Empire it was a sickness. He stepped forward, every hair on his body rising. It wasn't sickness, was it? No, Allura said. It was isolation. The words dropped like thunder. She cried, Allura whispered, like Amira did, day and night. And she choked, the first crack in her voice since he met her. We applied every technique, every priestess, every healer. Nothing worked. Until she stopped. Jonah's voice was dust. She didn't calm. She gave up. Yes. Silence. My counsel told me to remove Amira from public view the moment she began to show signs. I refused, and then you came. I was never supposed to be here. And yet, you are, she said. And I find myself asking, was that chance or design? He didn't answer. Couldn't. The doors opened behind them with a mechanical sigh. The High Seer entered, followed by two relic keepers carrying a stasis cube carved from starbone. Inside, suspended like a tear frozen in time, glowed a single piece of living crystal. Heartroot, the seer intoned. Only one of the Echo Line may unlock it. Jonah stepped back. I'm not doing this. Then Amira dies, the seer said flatly. His breath stopped. Alora's gaze was steady now. We cannot force you, but we are out of time. The child's empathy is growing exponentially. It will collapse her mind unless someone matches the flow. She's an infant. How is this happening so fast? She's not just an infant. The seer said, she's a mirror of everything we buried. Every sorrow. Every truth. Jonah stared at the cube. It pulsed when he looked at it. He stepped forward. And it pulsed. Again brighter now. He reached out. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, everything stopped. The room froze. Time bent. And Jonah saw. He saw a great city of light, long buried beneath Verilin soil, filled with human and alien alike. He saw scientists and scions working side by side. He saw ships seeded with DNA from both worlds launched toward uncharted systems, one of them toward Earth. He saw the sundering, the war that tore them apart. He saw the final act, Verilin Queen giving her infant daughter to a human botanist, one who looked exactly like Jonah. Not an ancestor, not a metaphor, him, but from another time. Another cycle. He staggered back as the vision ended, gasping for breath. The cube in his hand had melted into his skin, pulsing softly beneath his palm. Alora stood frozen, her face pale. You saw it, she said. Didn't you? Yes, Jonah whispered. You've lived this before. Yes, what are you now? He looked at her, dazed. I think I'm the failsafe. And behind them, from the nursery, Amira laughed, not the cry of an overwhelmed heir, but the laughter of a child who knew her guardian had finally remembered who he was. The throne hall of the Verilin Empire had never been silent for this. Long. Not during coronations. Not during wars. Not even during the sunderng. Now. As the heartroot crystal pulsed beneath Jonah's skin and Amira floated beside him in a new cradle of woven starlight, silence reigned. The council stood frozen along the perimeter, their expressions caught somewhere between reverence and fear. Nobles from distant systems clutched ceremonial staffs tighter. Generals with neural-linked weapons dared not move. Even the priestesses, the ones who once declared emotion a risk to rule, watched with wide, uncertain eyes. Only Queen Alora moved, and she walked alone. Gone were the armor and ceremonial robes. She wore simple woven black, lined in indigo, the color of endings and beginnings. Her crown had been left behind, resting in the temple of inheritance. What she wore now was more powerful than regalia. She wore choice. Jonah stood before her, hands by his side, still not understanding what he had become. The sigil etched beneath his skin had stopped glowing now, but its warmth lingered, like the aftershock of a heartbeat that did not belong to him. Amira's soft light pulsed in harmony with his own. Wherever he went, she reached for him, her tether, her anchor, her echo. And now the queen stood in front of them both. Her voice amplified not by technology, but by will. You all witnessed it, she said, turning to the court. He did not force his way into our circle. He did not come seeking power or glory or prophecy. He came as presence. Some flinched. Others watched her like a sun about to collapse into something new. When my daughter cried, she continued, When none of our science, our ritual, our blood could calm her, it was he, Jonah of Earth, who held her, not with strength, not with law, but with being. And because of him, she lives. Whispers broke through the crowd. Jonah heard one voice murmur, "But he is not of us." And then Alora turned to him. "Show them." Jonah hesitated, but Amira looked up at him and smiled. He nodded once, then stepped forward into the center of the hall, where the floor itself was still scarred with the sigil from the seer's revelation. Beneath his feet, light bloomed again, not summoned but answered. The crystal root pattern expanded outward, touching the feet of every being in the hall, and it pulsed once, twice, then all. Around them, the throne room remembered. The walls turned to holographic memory, alive with images that hadn't existed for 1,000 generations. Scenes played in the air, a joint colony between Earth and Verilin, shared research, children of blended blood, laughter in a language that fused both tongues, a final transmission. If the root fails, the child must choose. Only through resonance can the line survive. The one who stays will awaken it. The vision faded, and Jonah stood not as a stranger, but as an answer. Gasps filled the room. Alora raised her hand once more. The child chose him, as the vision foretold, as the line demands. And so by decree of the living throne, I name Jonah of Earth, guardian of the air, warden of the root, and companion to the crown. Shocked silence. Then a cry of protest. A noble stepped forward, furious. This outsider, he bears no title, no house, no blood, right? Jonah stepped forward, calm, steady, present. I bear no blood, he said, only bond. The noble sneered. You're just a man. Jonah looked at him evenly. And yet she stops crying when I hold her. Tell me, which of you ever managed? That? A ripple of uncomfortable truth passed through the crowd. The noble hesitated. Then the queen said softly, Let it be known, if any would challenge this bond, they must take the child from his arms. No one moved, because none could. Amira cooed, glowing faintly. Jonah looked down at her, his voice low. We did it, little star. Alora approached him slowly, eyes not filled with command now, but something quieter, warmer, I should fear. This, she said, a human, a prophecy, a forgotten truth. You don't? She shook her head. No, I remember now. Jonah turned to her fully. Remember what? She reached up, brushing his cheek, not formally, not ceremonially, just gently, that I was never made to rule alone. A stunned hush filled the room. Then she turned, lifting the child high. Behold the heir of light and echo, and know that her guardian walks beside her, born of earth, remembered by the stars. The cheer was not immediate, but it came, first, from a servant, then a noble, then a general, then the priestesses, until the walls shook with the sound of a people letting go of disbelief and stepping into legacy. Jonah stood there, silent, the weight of it settling into his shoulders, not as burden but as purpose. Amira laughed again, and in that moment, two worlds, one of stars, one of soil, became one, and peace, once thought lost to war and forgetting, found its roots in the arms of a human, who stayed.